At the moment seeing takes place, if the person does not note seeing right away, then one does not discern the nama rupa in the seeing. And one goes beyond the true nature, and one recognizes what has been seen as man, woman. So there will be the concept of man, woman based on what has been seen. And the defilements arise on the object that has been seen. There is nimitta kaha, as the person takes a look at it as a whole, and one is having kilesa defilements based on what has been seen, and there are thoughts about what has been seen. And the person comes to think how the hands are, how the feet are, how the face is, without an end. And Sayadaw gives the example when eating rice, when one takes rice with curry and other side dishes, the meal becomes appetizing. So in the meal, the curry and other side dishes are making the meal appetizing. In the same way, when a person looks at another person, looking at the parts of the other person, then the person gets more interested in the other person. So the person takes more delight in seeing the other person, looking into the details, looking into the features in detail of the another person. So there will be anubhyasana kaha. The person takes a look at the parts of the body in detail, and defilements arise. Based on not knowing, there is tanha, craving, arises. There is craving, clinging, and there is also wrong view that it is the person, it is man, woman. And also the person do things in order to get, in order to possess him or her. And more unwholesomeness arise. What has been heard or what has been seen is a result of one's good and bad deeds that have been done in the past. At the moment of seeing, what really arises are the nama rupa that are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. By being mindful of seeing in the way of satipatthana practice, one discerns the nama rupa and one discerns that they are suffering. Knowing, discerning the nama rupa, discerning that they are suffering, one will not crave onto them. And samudaya satya, the origin of suffering, will also be removed. In this way, discerning dukkha satya, discerning the truth of suffering, samudaya satya, the origin of suffering, is also removed. By discerning, one removes not knowing and knowing wrongly, and thus one also removes tasna, craving, upadana, clinging, and karma, the good and bad deeds that are leading to further existences. So in this way, by being mindful, one is cultivating the 8 factors of the path. One discerns the truth of suffering. One discerns the truth of suffering. One removes the origin of suffering. One realizes momentary cessation, and one cultivates the 8 factors of the path. So these 4, discerning, removing, realizing, and cultivating, arise all at the same time by being mindful. And Sayadaw would like to encourage the yogi how each moment of mindfulness is very precious. And if one fails to be mindful, there will be a loss. So Sayadaw would like to compare how precious each moment of mindfulness is with the loss there will be by lacking mindfulness. There are the 4 noble truths. They are truthful. There is no such thing that they are no longer truthful. So they are always truthful, and there are these 4 noble truths. The first one is dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. The second is samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering. Nirodha satya, the truth of the cessation. The continuous arising of the nama rupa is called bhavata, and abhavata is the cessation of these nama rupa, and it is also called as nirodha satya, the truth of cessation. One realizes the cessation where all the nama rupa cease, and it is totally free from arising and passing away. All the nama rupa comes to cessation. So it is called nirodha satya, the truth of cessation of suffering. By being mindful, the defilements come to a momentary cessation. And magga satya is the truth of the path leading to cessation. So by practicing Satipatthana meditation, one is developing, cultivating the 8 factors of the path. In this way, by practicing Satipatthana meditation, one will discern what should be discerned. One removes and abandons what should be abandoned. One realizes what should be realized. And one cultivates and develops what should be developed. So there are 4 things: the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, which should be discerned; samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering, which should be abandoned and removed; nirodha satya, the truth of cessation, which should be realized; and magga satya, the truth of the path leading to cessation, that should be developed and cultivated. Among the four truths, the first one is dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. And to explain it in everyday language, every object such as touching, knowing, hearing, seeing, whatever nama rupa that arises in oneself are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. In sitting meditation, the objects that are obvious, such as rising and falling of the abdomen, is also dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. In the whole body, there is the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. So every object that arises in oneself are the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. The craving, longing, wanting, these cravings are called samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering. The cessation of the nama rupa are called nirodha satya, the truth of cessation of all suffering. The path leading to the cessation is called magga satya, the truth of the path leading to cessation. Among the Four Noble Truths, the first two truths are lokiya satya, they are the mundane truths. And the later two are lokuttara satya, the super mundane truths. As the lokuttara satya, the super mundane truth, has not arisen yet, it is sufficient by knowing the quality of the later two. The first two, lokiya satya, the first two truths which are mundane, should be discerned. Among these two, dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, should be discerned. So there is the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, bending, stretching, turning, opening and closing of the eyes, blinking. They are the nama rupa arising due to the causes and conditions. And all these seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, bending, stretching, opening and closing of the eyes, blinking, they are the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. And one should be mindful of all these objects. Dukkha jnana, by being mindful of them, one cultivates knowledge and one discerns the truth of suffering. If the person is not being mindful, there will be dukkha ajnana, there will be not knowing. One does not discern the truth of suffering. And to explain it in everyday language, if one does not look, one will not see. If one does not observe, one will not discern. Not observing meticulously, thoroughly, one will not discern in detail. In the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and so on, there are the receptor element, the eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue, body, and the mind. On these bases, the striker elements, the visible object, the sound, the smell, the taste, and the tangible object come into contact, and there will be seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling consciousness, tasting consciousness, touching consciousness, and knowing consciousness, as well as seeing contact, seeing feeling, hearing contact, hearing feeling, smelling contact, smelling feeling, tasting contact, tasting feeling, touching contact, touching feeling, knowing contact, knowing feeling. So when the sense objects strike the receptor element, the base, then seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing takes place. The other day, Sayadaw-12th explained by giving the example of hearing and seeing, and it goes the same with the smelling, tasting, touching, and knowing. Later on, Sayadaw-12th might explain the other examples. So when the 6 kinds of the striker element strikes the receptor element, there will be ignition element, consciousness, contact, and feeling. Based on what the object is, if the object is good, there will be good feeling. If the object is bad, there will be bad feeling. If the object is neutral, there will be neutral feeling. And the seeing consciousness, seeing contact, and seeing feeling, they are not wholesome and they are not unwholesome. It is just seeing, mere seeing. Hearing consciousness, it is neither wholesome nor unwholesome. It is just the result of one's good deeds that have been done in the past. So by being mindful, there will just be mere hearing. If there is lack of mindfulness, there greed arises based on what has been seen, what has been heard. So if there is good feeling, one wants better feeling, and one wants more and more. Tanha craving increases more and more. Coming into contact with bad things, one craves for good things. If the person does not have clean water, the person craves for clean water. Having salty water, the person craves for sweet, good water. There will be craving. By being mindful, there will be sandhi, peace. The mind is free from agitation of the defilements. If there is calmness, one craves for more calmness. If there is comfort, one craves for more comfort. If there is neutral feeling, then one craves for better feeling. So tanha, craving arises based on good feeling, wanting better feeling. When there is bad feeling, one craves for good ones to come. And when there are neutral feelings, one craves for more calmness. In this way, tanha, craving arises. So in order to just stop at the moment of feeling, there should be mindfulness. So having mindfulness, by practicing Satipatthana meditation, it will just stop at the feeling and it will not lead to craving. the seeing, there are the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. The eye base, which is the receptor element, is the rupa, materiality, which is the truth of suffering. So in the receptor element, there are many particles of sensitivity, materiality. And in the striker element, visible objects, also there are many particles of the striker element. They are also rupa, materiality, which are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. When the striker element strikes the receptor element, seeing consciousness takes place. Seeing consciousness, seeing contact, and seeing feeling takes place. Seeing consciousness, seeing contact, and seeing feeling are the ignition elements, which are nama, mentality. The seeing contact is phassa, seeing feeling is vedana. So in this way, among the ignition elements, there are three: the seeing consciousness, seeing contact, and seeing feeling that manifest in the seeing, which are nama, mentality, and they are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. And based on whether the visible object is pleasant or unpleasant, there will be good or bad feeling. If the visible object is neutral, there will be neutral feeling connected with the seeing. So among the nama, mentality, the consciousness, the contact, and the feeling are the most obvious. And when the yogi is mindful of the seeing, hearing, the consciousness, the contact, and the feeling are the most obvious. In the seeing, the eye base and the visible object are rupa, materiality, which are the truth of suffering. Seeing consciousness, seeing contact, and seeing feeling are the nama, that are mentality, that are the truth of suffering. In the seeing, the two, materiality, and the three, mentality, are obvious in the seeing, and they are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. In order to discern them, one should be mindful at the moment of seeing. One should not deliberately analyze as this is the receptor, this is the striker, this is the ignition, but one should note it generally just as seeing. One should note seeing with aim and effort so that mindfulness will be sustained. One should have the ardent effort in the noting so that one discerns the nama and rupa, the mentality and materiality, which are the truth of suffering. And noting, seeing with aim and effort, when sati and samadhi, mindfulness and concentration are strong, one discerns the nama rupa. One discerns the eye sensitivity. And in order for the eye sensitivity to be good, there are supporting factors such as the tavi, the earth element, apo, the water element, tejo, the temperature element. And one discerns the receptor element, that it is where the visible object strikes. And one also discerns as it is where the seeing takes place. It is where the seeing dwells. In this way, one discerns the receptor element. At times, one discerns the striker element. One discerns that it is the object that has been seen. It is the object of seeing consciousness. In this way, one discerns the striker element. And one discerns the ignition element, such as there is mere seeing. And one discerns the contact, that the visible object and the seeing consciousness come into contact. In this way, one discerns the contact. And one discerns the feeling, such as there is good, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or the neutral feeling. In this way, one discerns the materiality and mentality that arises in the seeing. In order to discern them, one should note generally just as seeing. Depending on where the mind falls onto, depending on where the attention is adverted to, one discerns one of these nama rupa that are arising in the seeing. But it is not possible to discern every element or every nama rupa at the same time. One discerns the one that the mind falls onto. One discerns the one where the attention is adverted to. And it is said that by discerning one, one automatically discerns the others. In order to discern the dukkha satya, one should be mindful at the moment of seeing. And discerning correctly, one discerns suffering as suffering. One should be mindful as soon as the seeing takes place. So one should immediately note as seeing as soon as seeing takes place. In the seeing, there are the nama and rupa that are the truth of suffering. And by being mindful, one cultivates knowledge, and there will be dukkha jnana. One discerns the truth of suffering. Not discerning, there will be craving. By discerning, craving is removed. Based on the dukkha satya, the truth of suffering that had been noted, tasna, craving does not arise. And by encountering unpleasant objects, one will not crave for the good ones. Coming across good, pleasant objects, one will not crave to see better ones. Whatever the object is, whether pleasant or unpleasant, there will neither be greed nor craving. By being mindful, by discerning, craving is removed. In this way, samudaya satya, the origin of suffering, is removed. Removing, abandoning the samudaya means not giving chance for the craving to arise. In this way, Tasna, craving, does not arise. Upadana, clinging, does not arise. Kamupadana, clinging with craving, does not arise. Discerning the Nama Rupa, one clearly understands that there is no person, no being, no Jiva Atta, no individual soul. What really arise are the Nama Rupa that are arising as cause and effect. And discerning that relevant cause gives rise to relevant effect, one removes the wrong view of Creator. Discerning that seeing takes place and dissolves, seeing the arising and passing away, one removes the wrong view of permanence. In this way, one removes the wrong view, one removes the clinging with wrong view. And based on what has been seen, one removes craving, clinging. In this way, the defilements, delusion, moha, craving, tanha, clinging, upadana, have no chance to arise. Removing craving, smudaya sajja, the origin of suffering, will have no chance to arise. Avijja, tanha, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging, are removed, and thus there will be tadanga nirodha, momentary cessation, where the avijja, tanha, and upadana are coming to cessation momentarily. By discerning, there will be panya sikha, wisdom training. When the mind is direct or face to face with the object, one discerns, and thus there will be panya sikha, wisdom training, and one is cultivating the teachings of the Buddha. There is nothing to be transgressed, and there is cetana sila, there is volition to refrain from wrongdoings. Samma vaca, right speech. Samma kamanda, right action. Samma ajiva, right livelihood are involved, and there will be sila sikha, morality training. In this way, by being mindful, sila, samadhi, and panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom are fulfilled, and the 8 factors of the path are developed. In this way, there is the discerning what should be discerned, removing what should be removed, realizing what should be realized, developing what should be developed. In this way, by being mindful, one discerns distinctly, discerning distinctly, one removes tatna, craving. Every time one discerns, tatna, craving is removed. And avijja, tatna, and upadana, ignorance, craving, and clinging are being seized momentarily. And one cultivates sila, samadhi, and panya. The 3 trainings of sila, samadhi, and panya are fulfilled. One develops the 8 factors of the path, and one fulfills the teachings of the Buddha. Sila, samadhi, and panya are being possessed by practicing, and thus one is said to be possessing the sasana, possessing the teachings of the Buddha within oneself through the practice of satipatthana. And Sayadaw will continue to explain from both theory and practice